What really happens when a husband walks out of his own anniversary party after watching his wife dance with another man? How far will a betrayed spouse go to protect his dignity without ever raising his voice? This is the story of the night I thought I was in control, right up until the legal documents arrived at my door. The champagne flutes gleamed under the soft lighting of our dining room as I adjusted the white roses for the third time. Everything had to be perfect for our 10th anniversary party. I smoothed down my new emerald dress, the one that hugged my curves just right, and checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. "Vesperine, you look absolutely radiant." My mother, Pauline, swept into the room wearing her signature pearls and that approving smile she reserved for moments when I was living up to her expectations. "That dress is divine on you. Sam is so lucky to have such a beautiful, confident wife." I preened under her praise, feeling that familiar warmth of validation. "Thank you, Mum. I wanted tonight to be special. We've invited everyone, my colleagues from the office, Sam's IT team, family, neighbors. It's going to be wonderful." Sam emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of appetizers, looking handsome, but somehow diminished in his conservative navy suit. He'd been quiet all week, buried in his computer work as usual. Sometimes I wondered if he even noticed me anymore. "The caterer's just left," he said, setting down the tray. "Everything's ready." His voice carried that flat, professional tone he'd been using lately, the same one he used in his endless work calls about servers and databases. "Wonderful." I kissed his cheek, leaving a faint lipstick mark. "Tonight's going to be amazing. Graeme said he has a special surprise for us." Sam's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Graeme's coming." "Of course he's coming. He's my boss, Sam. It would be rude not to invite him." I busied myself with the napkins, avoiding his gaze. "Besides, he's been so supportive of my career growth. You should be grateful I work for someone who values my contributions." My mother-in-law, Clara, arrived precisely at 7, as punctual as always. She kissed Sam's cheek warmly, but offered me only a polite nod. "Happy anniversary, dear," she said to me, though her tone suggested anything but celebration. "Clara, you look lovely," I replied, though her simple black dress seemed deliberately understated compared to my outfit. She'd never quite approved of me, I knew. Too traditional, too judgmental. She couldn't understand a modern woman's need for appreciation and excitement. My sister Lila arrived with 8-year-old Elijah, who immediately ran to hug his father. "Daddy, is this really a party? Can I stay up late?" Sam's face lit up for the first time all evening. "It's a celebration, buddy, but you'll need to go to bed at your regular time. School tomorrow." "Sam, it's a party," I protested. "Let him enjoy himself a little. He has a math test on Wednesday. He needs his sleep." There it was again, that controlling streak that had been suffocating me for months. Everything had to be scheduled, planned, predictable. Where was the spontaneity? The passion? The doorbell chimed, and my heart fluttered with anticipation. I knew it would be Graeme. I'd been looking forward to this moment all week, the chance to show him off, to let everyone see that successful, interesting men found me captivating. Graeme Sorrell stood in our doorway, like something from a magazine spread. At 49, he had that distinguished silver-at-the-temples look that made him impossibly attractive. His charcoal suit was clearly expensive, and he carried himself with the confidence that came from running a successful consulting firm. "Vesperine," he said, his voice warm and intimate, "you look absolutely stunning." He handed me an elegantly wrapped box. A little something to commemorate this special evening. I felt every eye in the room watching as I accepted his gift. "Graeme, you shouldn't have, but thank you." I could practically feel the envy radiating from the other women present. Sam stepped forward, extending his hand. "Graeme, thanks for coming." "Wouldn't miss it, Sam. 10 years is quite an achievement these days." Graeme's handshake was firm, confident. Everything about him radiated success and sophistication. I opened his gift with deliberate care, aware that I had an audience. Inside the elegant box lay a stunning silver bracelet with intricate Celtic knots. "Oh, Graeme, it's beautiful." "I thought you'd appreciate the craftsmanship," he said, his eyes holding mine just a moment longer than necessary. Celtic knots represent eternal bonds. Seemed appropriate for an anniversary. My mother clapped her hands together. "How thoughtful. Vesperine has such wonderful taste in friends." I caught Clara's expression from the corner of my eye. Her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. She whispered something to Sam, but he just shook his head and walked toward the kitchen. "The music's ready," Lila announced, clearly trying to shift the mood. "Should we start the dancing?" "Perfect timing," I said, fastening the bracelet around my wrist. The silver caught the light beautifully. "Graeme, you simply must be my first dance partner. It's only fitting since you gave me such a gorgeous gift." I didn't wait for his answer or look to see Sam's reaction. I simply took Graeme's hand and led him to the cleared space we'd designated as our dance floor. The soft jazz began playing, and I felt Graeme's hand settle on my waist as we began to move together. This was what I'd been missing. This feeling of being desired, appreciated, seen. Graeme was an excellent dancer, confident in leading, making me feel graceful and beautiful. Around us, I could sense the other guests watching, some with admiration, others with something less pleasant. "You're quite the dancer," Graeme murmured near my ear. "Sam's a lucky man." "I don't think Sam sees it that way anymore," I replied, allowing myself to move closer to him. "He's become so focused on work, so serious about everything. Sometimes I feel invisible in my own home." "That's a shame." Graeme's hand tightened slightly on my waist. "A woman like you should never feel invisible." The song seemed to last forever, and not nearly long enough. When it ended, I reluctantly stepped back, my cheeks flushed with excitement and the thrill of being the center of attention. I looked around for Sam, expecting to see jealousy, concern, some reaction to what had just happened. Instead, I found him standing by the kitchen doorway with that same polite smile he wore during work presentations. "Wonderful dancing, honey," he said calmly. "I'm going to check on the dessert preparations. Excuse me." And just like that, he disappeared into the kitchen, leaving me standing there with Graeme and a room full of guests who had witnessed our intimate dance. I felt a flicker of irritation as Sam vanished into the kitchen. Couldn't he at least pretend to care? Here I was, looking beautiful, being admired by a successful, attractive man, and my husband acted like he was watching a neighbor's slideshow from their vacation. "Is he always so understanding?" Graeme asked quietly, his hand still resting lightly on my back. "Sam doesn't get jealous," I said, though something in my chest twisted uncomfortably. "He's very secure, very trusting." The words felt hollow even as I spoke them. My mother appeared at my elbow, beaming. "That was lovely, sweetheart. You two looked so elegant together, like something from a movie." Clara, however, had moved to the kitchen doorway where Sam had disappeared. I caught her shooting disapproving glances in my direction before following her son. "Mom's being dramatic," I told Pauline, loud enough for others to hear. "It was just a dance. Sam knows I love to dance, and he's not much of a dancer himself. He's probably relieved someone else can keep up with me." Lila approached with Elijah, who looked confused by the tension he could clearly sense but couldn't understand. "Maybe we should start the toasts," she suggested diplomatically. "Excellent idea," Graeme said. "I'd be honored to say a few words about this lovely couple." As the guests gathered with their champagne flutes, I noticed Sam emerge from the kitchen. He looked composed, even pleasant, but something in his eyes had changed. When he smiled at me across the room, it was the kind of smile I'd seen him use with difficult clients, professional, distant, carefully controlled. Graeme raised his glass, commanding the room's attention effortlessly. To Sam and Vesperine Lowell. 10 years of marriage is no small feat in today's world. Vesperine, you're a remarkable woman. Intelligent, beautiful, full of life. Any man would be lucky to have your attention, even for a single dance." The room chuckled politely, but I noticed several people glancing between Sam and me with uncomfortable expressions. Graeme's toast felt loaded with subtext that made my pulse quicken. "And Sam," Graeme continued, "you're a fortunate man indeed. Here's to many more years of understanding between you both." We all drank, but the champagne tasted flat in my mouth. Sam's smile never wavered, but he was looking at Graeme with an expression I'd never seen before. Calculating, measuring, filing away information. "Thank you, Graeme," Sam said when the applause died down. "That was very illuminating." He set down his champagne flute on the nearest table. "If you'll all excuse me, I need to make a quick phone call. Work emergency. You know how it is in IT. Systems don't respect anniversaries." He kissed my cheek with that same polite smile. "Keep enjoying the party, sweetheart. I'll be right back." But he didn't come right back. 20 minutes passed, then 30. I found myself checking the hallway, listening for his voice, making excuses to the guests who asked where he'd gone. "He's probably dealing with some server crisis," I told my mother's friend Margaret. "You know how these tech guys are, always on call." But privately, I was growing annoyed. This was our anniversary party, our night, and he was hiding somewhere dealing with work. It was typical Sam, avoiding anything that required emotional engagement, burying himself in his safe, predictable world of computers and code. Graeme stayed close to me as the evening progressed, refilling my champagne, making witty conversation with the other guests, treating me like the most fascinating woman in the room. This was what I'd been craving: attention, appreciation, the feeling of being truly seen. "Your husband seems to have disappeared entirely," Graeme observed as we found ourselves alone on the back patio. The party continued inside, but the cool evening air felt refreshing after the warm, crowded house. "Sam's not much for parties," I said, the champagne making me more honest than I should have been. "He prefers his computer screen to actual human interaction most of the time." "What a waste." Graeme moved closer, his voice dropping to that intimate tone that made my stomach flutter. "If you were my wife, I'd never leave your side at a party. I'd want everyone to see how lucky I was." The word sent a thrill through me that I hadn't felt in years. When was the last time Sam had said anything like that? When was the last time he'd looked at me like I was someone worth fighting for? "Graeme, we should go back inside," I said, but I didn't move away from him. "Should we?" His hand brushed against mine. "Or should we acknowledge what's been building between us for months?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do." His fingers traced along my wrist, over the bracelet he'd given me. "Those late meetings, the way you light up when I walk into your office, the way you've been looking at me tonight. We're both adults, Vesperine. We both know what this is." Before I could respond, Leela appeared in the doorway. "Vesperine, people are starting to ask about cutting the anniversary cake." I stepped back from Graeme quickly, my cheeks burning. "Of course, we should do that now." Inside, the guests had gathered around our dining table, where the elegant anniversary cake waited, but Sam was still nowhere to be seen. "Where's the guest of honor?" asked Jim from Sam's IT department. "I'll go find him," I said, though irritation was building in my chest. How dare he disappear during our own anniversary celebration? I checked his home office first. Empty. The bedroom, the basement, even the garage. His car was still in the driveway, but Sam was nowhere in the house. When I returned to the living room, I found Clara putting on her coat. "Clara, you're leaving?" She turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not just disapproval, but something close to pity. "Yes, dear, I think it's time. But we haven't cut the cake yet. And Sam left 20 minutes ago," she said quietly. "He called a cab, said to tell you he hoped you enjoyed the rest of your party." The room seemed to tilt around me. "He left? But why would he leave our anniversary party?" Clara studied my face for a long moment. I think you know why, Vesperine. I think you know exactly why. She kissed Elijah goodbye and whispered something to Lila before heading for the door. As she passed me, she stopped and spoke in a voice so low only I could hear. My son is a good man, a patient man, but he's not a fool. Her eyes flicked toward Graeme, who was charming a group of my co-workers near the fireplace. You might want to remember that. And then she was gone, leaving me standing in my own living room in my beautiful dress, wearing another man's bracelet, trying to explain to a room full of guests why the guest of honor had walked out of his own anniversary party. The rest of the party passed in a blur of forced smiles and increasingly creative explanations for Sam's absence. By the time the last guest left at nearly midnight, my face ached from maintaining the facade that everything was perfectly normal. Work emergency, I'd repeated over and over. You know how it is with IT managers. Systems crash at the worst possible times. Most people seemed to accept the explanation, though I caught several meaningful glances between couples as they said their goodbyes. Only Graeme lingered, helping me clean up the champagne flutes and dessert plates. That was quite an evening, he said, loading glasses into the dishwasher. Though I have to say, your husband's exit was rather dramatic. Sam's not dramatic, I snapped, then immediately softened my tone. He's just very dedicated to his work, sometimes too dedicated. Graeme moved closer, his hand covering mine on the kitchen counter. Vesperine, we need to talk about what happened tonight, about what's been happening between us. My phone buzzed with a text message. I grabbed it eagerly, hoping it was Sam, but instead found a message from my sister. Call me when you're ready to talk. I'm worried about you. I should go, Graeme said, reading my expression correctly. But this conversation isn't over. What we have is too important to ignore. After he left, I poured myself another glass of wine and tried calling Sam. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. Sam, it's me, I said to his voicemail. I don't understand why you left tonight. It was our anniversary party. Our friends were there. Our family. Please call me back. We need to talk about this. I tried texting. Where are you? I'm worried. Come home so we can discuss whatever's bothering you. No response. By 2 a.m, I was pacing the house in my pajamas, wine making me alternately angry and anxious. How dare he embarrass me like that? Walking out of our own party without a word, leaving me to make excuses to our guests. My phone rang, and I lunged for it, but it was my mother. Sweetheart, I just wanted to check on you. Is everything all right? Sam seemed a bit distant tonight. Sam's being ridiculous, I said, the wine loosening my tongue. He's sulking because I danced with Graeme. Can you believe that? In this day and age, he's acting jealous over a simple dance between colleagues. Well, honey, you did look quite comfortable together. Mom, you said yourself we looked elegant. There's nothing wrong with appreciating good conversation and sophistication. Sam's just threatened because Graeme is successful and charming and actually pays attention to me. I'm sure Sam pays attention to you, dear. When? When he's buried in his laptop? When he's talking about server configurations and network security? When was the last time Sam looked at me the way Graeme does? There was a pause on the other end. Vesperine, you're talking about another man looking at you in a way that should be reserved for your husband. I'm talking about feeling appreciated, Mum. About feeling like someone sees me as more than just a wife and mother who keeps the household running while he plays with computers. After I hung up, I tried Sam's number again. Still no answer. I woke up on the couch the next morning with a splitting headache and the taste of regret in my mouth. Elijah was shaking my shoulder gently. Mum? Where's Dad? He wasn't here when I got up, and he always makes my breakfast on Mondays. I struggled to sit up, my evening dress wrinkled and uncomfortable. He had to leave early for work, sweetheart. Emergency at his office. But as I helped Elijah get ready for school, I noticed that Sam's overnight bag was missing from the closet. His toothbrush was gone from the bathroom. This wasn't a late night at the office. This was something else entirely. At work, I could barely concentrate. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was Sam, but it was always something else. Meeting reminders, spam emails, a text from Graeme asking if I was okay. "You seem distracted today," Graeme observed when he stopped by my desk around noon. "Everything all right at home?" "Sam's being dramatic about last night," I said, lowering my voice. "He's upset about our dance, if you can believe that, acting like we committed some terrible crime." Graeme's expression grew serious. "Vesperine, maybe we should cool things down for a while. If your husband is suspicious—" "Suspicious of what?" I challenged. "We haven't done anything wrong. We're adults who enjoy each other's company. If Sam can't handle that, it's his problem, not ours." But even as I said the words, I felt a gnawing anxiety in my stomach. Sam had never just disappeared before. Even during our worst arguments, he'd always stayed and talked things through, maddeningly calm and rational. When I picked up Elijah from school, he immediately asked about his father. "Is Dad sick? He didn't call me today. He always calls before my math test." "He's just very busy with work, honey. He'll call tonight." But Sam didn't call that night, or the next day. By Wednesday evening, I was genuinely worried. I'd left 6 voicemails and sent a dozen text messages. Finally, at nearly 9 o'clock, my phone chimed with a message. It wasn't the response I'd expected. "Vesperine, I hope you and Elijah are well. I'm staying at the Marriott downtown for a few days to think things through. Please check your email regarding our household finances and legal matters. We'll need to discuss arrangements for Elijah's care. Sam." My hands shook as I read the message. Legal matters? Arrangements for Elijah's care? What was he talking about? I opened my laptop and found an email from Sam with several attachments: bank statements, insurance documents, and a letter from a law firm I'd never heard of. The letter was brief and devastating. "Dear Mrs. Lowell, we represent your husband, Samuel Lowell, in matters pertaining to the protection of marital assets and the welfare of minor children. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss temporary separation agreements and custody arrangements." The room spun around me. Separation agreements? Custody arrangements? I called Sam immediately, but it went to voicemail. This time, I didn't leave a message. Instead, I sat staring at the legal letterhead, trying to understand how a simple dance at our anniversary party had led to this. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about the dance. It was about the months of late meetings with Graeme, the way I'd been pulling away from Sam, the way I'd been making him feel small and boring and inadequate. It was about the way I'd been falling in love with another man while convincing myself it was harmless. And now, somehow, Sam knew. I barely slept that night, my mind racing through every interaction I'd had with Graeme, every late meeting, every text message. How much did Sam actually know? How much was suspicion versus proof? The next morning, I called the law firm mentioned in the email. The receptionist was polite but firm. "Mrs. Lowell, Mr. Patterson will need to speak with your legal representation. We recommend you retain counsel before any discussions take place." Retain counsel? For what? I wasn't the one who'd walked out on our marriage over a dance. At work, I was a wreck. I kept checking my phone, jumping every time someone walked past my desk. Graeme noticed my distress immediately. "You look terrible," he said bluntly when he stopped by my office. "What's going on?" "Sam's filed for separation," I whispered, glancing around to make sure no one could overhear. "He's got lawyers involved, talking about custody arrangements. I don't understand how this escalated so quickly." Graeme's face went pale. "Separation? Over what happened at the party?" "I don't know. Maybe he suspects more." I looked up at him, suddenly seeing our relationship through different eyes. "Graeme, if this goes to court, if there are questions about our working relationship—" "Let's not panic," he said, but I could see the concern in his expression. "Maybe he's just trying to scare you. A lot of men make threats they don't follow through on." But I was beginning to realize that Sam wasn't most men. In 10 years of marriage, he'd never made empty threats. When Sam said something, he meant it. My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. "Can you meet me for lunch? We need to talk." I found my sister at a quiet cafe downtown, looking uncharacteristically serious. She waited until I'd ordered coffee before speaking. "Vesperine, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." My stomach clenched. "Okay. Are you having an affair with your boss?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "What? No, why would you ask that?" "Because of the way you two looked at each other at the party. Because of the way you danced together. Because Sam left his own anniversary celebration and hasn't been home since." "It's not an affair," I said quickly. "Graeme and I are close. We work well together. But we haven't crossed any lines." Lila studied my face carefully. "Haven't you?" The truth was more complicated than I wanted to admit. Graeme and I hadn't been physically intimate, but there had been moments, lingering touches, meaningful looks, conversations that felt more like emotional affairs than professional discussions. "It's complicated," I finally said. "It's really not," Lila replied. "Either you're committed to your marriage or you're not. Either you're being faithful to Sam or you're not. There's no grey area here, Vesperine." "You don't understand what it's like," I said, feeling defensive. "Sam's been distant for months. He barely notices me anymore. Graeme makes me feel alive again, appreciated, interesting." "So you thought the solution was to humiliate your husband in front of your friends and family?" "I didn't humiliate anyone. It was just a dance." "It was a public display of your feelings for another man," Lila said sharply. Everyone at that party could see what was happening. Clara was mortified. Some of the guests were actually embarrassed for Sam. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "That's ridiculous. People are reading too much into an innocent—" "Vesperine, stop." Lila's voice was firm. "I love you, but you need to face reality here. You've been having an emotional affair, at minimum. You embarrassed your husband publicly, and now he's protecting himself legally because he doesn't trust you anymore." The words stung because they contained too much truth. What am I supposed to do? He won't even talk to me. "Maybe start by ending whatever's going on with Graeme, completely. Then get yourself a good lawyer, and hope Sam's willing to work things out." That afternoon, I tried to focus on work, but my concentration was shattered. Around 3 o'clock, my personal email chimed with a message from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line made my blood run cold. "Documentation for legal proceedings." The email contained dozens of attachments, screenshots of text messages between Graeme and me, copies of our work calendars showing our frequent meetings, even photos from the anniversary party that clearly showed our intimate body language during the dance. But the most devastating attachment was an audio file labeled "Anniversary Party, Kitchen Conversation." With trembling fingers, I clicked play. It was a recording of a conversation I didn't even remember having. Graeme and me in the kitchen during the party, his voice low and intimate. "You look incredible tonight. Sam's a fool if he doesn't see what he has." And my response, wine-softened and flirtatious. "Sam sees me as a housekeeper and babysitter. You see me as a woman." "I see you as my woman," Graeme's voice continued. "This charade with your husband is getting old, Vesperine. When are we going to stop pretending?" My own voice, laughing softly. "Soon. I just need to figure out the right way to handle things." I stared at the computer screen in horror. I didn't remember that conversation, but there it was, recorded in perfect clarity. How had Sam gotten this? Had he been recording our party? The email continued with a brief message. "Mrs. Lowell, these materials will be presented in court proceedings. Your attorney should review them carefully. Patterson and Associates." I called Graeme immediately. "We have a problem. A big problem." "What kind of problem?" "Sam recorded us at the party. He has evidence of our conversations, our text messages, everything." There was a long pause. "What kind of evidence?" "Audio recordings, Graeme, of us talking about being together, about my marriage being a charade. He has everything." Another pause. longer this time. Vesperine, I think we need to step back from each other for a while. If this is going to court, I can't be involved. You can't be involved? This is about both of us. No. His voice was already becoming distant, professional. This is about your marriage. I'm not married to Sam, you are. I can't let this affect my career or my own relationship with Tom. I felt the ground shifting beneath me. Graeme, you can't just abandon me now. We're in this together. We're not in anything together, Vesperine. We work together. We're friends. Anything else was a misunderstanding. The line went dead, and I sat staring at my phone in disbelief. Graeme was abandoning me, just like that. After months of making me feel special, desired, important, now that there were consequences, he was running. I was completely alone, facing legal proceedings with evidence I couldn't deny, married to a man who'd been 3 steps ahead of me the entire time. For the first time since this all began, I realized I might have seriously underestimated my quiet, boring, predictable husband. The next few days passed in a blur of panic and desperate phone calls. I hired a lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Hendricks, who charged $300 an hour and delivered brutal honesty. "Mrs. Lowell," she said after reviewing Sam's evidence, "you're in a very difficult position. Your husband has documented proof of an emotional affair, possibly more. The recordings are particularly damaging because they show intent to leave the marriage. But Graeme and I never actually—" "It doesn't matter," Patricia interrupted. "Adultery in this state includes emotional infidelity. And frankly, these recordings suggest you were planning to leave your husband for this other man." I felt sick. "What does this mean for custody? For our assets?" "It means your husband has significant leverage. He's positioned himself as the wronged party, and he has evidence to support that position. The court will likely favor him in custody arrangements, and depending on your prenup—" "We don't have a prenup," Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Then your husband is entitled to half of everything, but given the adultery evidence, he might be awarded more. Plus, he's been very smart about protecting assets. He's moved money into accounts you can't access, established separate credit lines, documented all marital property. He can't just take everything. He's not taking everything. He's protecting his interests while the legal process plays out. It's actually quite sophisticated. Someone advised him well." That someone was probably Clara, I realized. Sam's mother had never liked me, and she'd probably been planning for this moment for years. At work, the atmosphere had become unbearable. Word of the separation had leaked somehow, and I could feel people watching me, whispering when I walked by. Graeme avoided me completely, treating me with cold professionalism when we had to interact. "I need to discuss the Morrison account," he said during one painful meeting, his voice completely devoid of the warmth that used to make my heart race. "Of course," I replied, trying to maintain my dignity. "I have the reports ready." But I could see it in his eyes. I'd become a liability, an embarrassment, a reminder of poor judgment. The man who'd once made me feel like the most desirable woman in the world now looked at me like I was a stranger. Worse, my colleagues were treating me differently too. The women who'd once envied my relationship with Graeme now looked at me with pity or disgust. The men avoided me entirely, probably afraid of being associated with the office scandal. When I picked up Elijah from school on Friday, he was quieter than usual. "Mom, when is Dad coming home?" "I don't know, sweetheart. He's working through some things." "Is it because of the man at the party? The one you danced with?" My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "Some kids at school said their parents were talking about you and Dad getting divorced. They said you like someone else better than Dad." I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking. "Elijah, honey, sometimes adults have problems they need to work out. But no matter what happens between Dad and me, we both love you very much." "But do you love Dad?" The question hung in the air between us. Did I love Sam? I'd thought I did, but somewhere along the way, I'd convinced myself that love meant constant excitement, constant validation, constant romance. Sam offered stability, reliability, partnership, but I'd started seeing those as boring rather than valuable. It's complicated, baby. That's what adults always say when they don't want to tell the truth. That weekend, I tried to create some normalcy for Elijah, but everything felt wrong. The house was too quiet without Sam's presence. I found myself looking for him in every room, expecting to hear his voice calling from his office or the kitchen. On Sunday evening, my phone rang. It was Sam. "Hi, Vesperine. I wanted to talk to Elijah, and then we need to discuss some practical matters." His voice was calm, professional, completely devoid of emotion. It was like talking to a stranger. "Sam, please, can we just talk? Really talk? I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. I'd like to speak with Elijah first." I handed the phone to our son, who immediately brightened. "Dad, when are you coming home? I miss you." I could only hear Elijah's side of the conversation, but it was clear Sam was being careful not to make promises he couldn't keep. "Okay, Dad, I love you too." When Elijah handed the phone back, Sam's tone was businesslike again. "I'll be by tomorrow evening to pick up more of my things. I'd prefer if you weren't there." Lila said she could watch Elijah. "Sam, please, we need to talk about this. About us. There is no us anymore, Vesperine. You made that clear at our anniversary party. It was just a dance. You're blowing this completely out of proportion." "It wasn't just a dance, and we both know it." His voice remained maddeningly calm. "I've heard the recordings, Vesperine. I know about the late meetings, the text messages, the plans you were making with Graeme. How long have you been recording me?" "Long enough to protect myself legally. Long enough to document what's been happening in our marriage." I felt a chill run down my spine. "You've been spying on me. I've been protecting my son and my assets from a wife who was planning to leave me for another man. The recordings were just insurance. Sam, I never meant for things to go this far. Graeme and I, it's over. It was never really anything to begin with." "I'm sure it is over. I imagine Graeme distanced himself the moment he realized there would be consequences." The accuracy of that statement stung. "Please, can we just try counseling? Can we try to work this out? Vesperine, you spent months lying to me, humiliated me in front of our friends and family, and were planning to end our marriage for another man. What exactly do you think we should work out? Our marriage, our family, 10 years together has to count for something." It did count for something. That's why this hurts so much. For the first time since this all began, I heard emotion creep into his voice. Not anger, but deep, profound sadness. "Sam, I'll be by tomorrow at 7. Please make sure you're not there." The line went dead, and I sat holding the phone, finally understanding that my quiet, predictable, boring husband had been planning his exit strategy while I'd been planning my affair. And he'd been much better at it than I was. The next few weeks blurred together in a series of legal meetings, awkward encounters, and the gradual dismantling of the life I'd taken for granted. Sam was methodical in everything he did, collecting his belongings, establishing his new living situation, maintaining his relationship with Elijah while keeping me at arm's length. I tried everything I could think of to reach him. I wrote letters apologizing for my behavior. I sent text messages promising to end all contact with Graeme. I even showed up at his hotel one evening, begging him to reconsider. "Vesperine, you need to stop," he said when he found me in the lobby. "This isn't helping anyone." "I'll do anything, Sam, anything to fix this. I'll quit my job, we can move away, start fresh somewhere else." "You'll quit your job to avoid the man you were planning to leave me for." His voice held no anger, just exhaustion. "Do you see how that sounds? I made a mistake. A huge mistake. But people make mistakes, Sam. People work through problems." "Some mistakes are too big to work through," he said quietly. "Some betrayals cut too deep." "So that's it? 10 years of marriage, and you're just giving up?" "I'm not giving up. I'm protecting myself and our son from further damage." It was during our third mediation session that I finally understood the full scope of Sam's preparations. His lawyer presented a comprehensive settlement proposal that was both generous and devastating. Mr. Lowell is proposing a 60-40 asset split in his favor, given the documented adultery, the mediator explained. He's requesting primary custody of the minor child, with generous visitation for Mrs. Lowell. He's also prepared to maintain the family home until the child reaches 18, at which point it will be sold and proceeds divided. I looked across the table at Sam, who was reviewing documents with the same calm focus he brought to his work projects. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I've tried to be fair while protecting Elijah's interests, he replied without looking up. Fair? You're taking our son away from me. I'm providing him with stability. You'll have him every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. That's hardly taking him away. My lawyer leaned over to whisper in my ear, Vesperine, this is actually a very reasonable offer given the circumstances. I'd recommend accepting it. I want to fight this, I whispered back. With what? He has recordings, documentation, witnesses. Fighting this will cost you more money and likely result in a worse outcome. But I wasn't ready to give up. I want a trial. I want to present my side of the story. Sam finally looked up from his papers. Vesperine, do you really want our private business aired in open court? Do you want Elijah to read about this in public record someday? I want a chance to explain. Explain what? That you fell in love with another man, that you were planning to leave our marriage, that you humiliated me publicly while I tried to save face for our son's sake. The room fell silent. Even the lawyers looked uncomfortable. I want to call Graeme as a witness, I said desperately. He can testify that nothing physical happened between us. Sam's lawyer smiled grimly. Mrs. Lowell, Mr. Sorrell has already provided a sworn statement. He's characterized your relationship as purely professional and expressed concern about your apparent obsession with him. The words hit me like a physical blow. Obsession? He pursued me. According to his statement, you misinterpreted professional mentoring as romantic interest. He's provided his own documentation showing his attempts to maintain appropriate boundaries. I felt the world tilt around me. Graeme had not only abandoned me, he'd rewritten our entire relationship to protect himself. Every intimate conversation, every meaningful touch, every promise of a future together had been reframed as my delusion. That's not true, I whispered. It doesn't matter what's true, my lawyer said quietly. It matters what can be proven in court. Sam was watching me with something that might have been pity. Vesperine, take the settlement. It's fair, it protects Elijah, and it lets us both move forward with some dignity and tact. That night I sat in our empty house, my empty house now, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. 6 weeks ago, I'd been a successful professional woman with an exciting romance and a stable marriage to fall back on. Now I was a divorced single mother with a damaged reputation and no romantic prospects. I called my mother, desperate for support and sympathy. "Oh, sweetheart," Pauline said when I explained the settlement terms. "I'm so sorry this happened, but maybe this is for the best." "How is this for the best, Mom?" "Well, you were unhappy in your marriage. You said so yourself. And now you're free to find someone who really appreciates you." "I lost my son, Mom. I lost my home, my marriage, my reputation. How is that for the best?" "You didn't lose Elijah. You'll still see him regularly. And as for your reputation," she paused. "Honey, maybe you should have thought about that before you got involved with a married man." Even my own mother was blaming me. "Graeme isn't married to a woman, Mom. He's married to a man. And I thought you supported my choices." "I support your happiness, sweetheart, but not at the expense of other people's lives, not at the expense of your own family." After I hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and walked through the house Sam and I had bought together 8 years ago. Every room held memories of our life together. Elijah's first steps in the living room, family movie nights in the den, quiet Sunday mornings in the kitchen. I'd thrown it all away for a man who'd discarded me the moment things became complicated. The next morning, I signed the settlement agreement. 3 months later, I stood in the driveway watching Sam load Elijah's belongings into his car. Our son was moving to his father's new apartment across town, where he'd have his own room and a stable routine. "I'll see you Wednesday, okay, buddy?" I said, hugging Elijah tightly. "Okay, Mom. Will you be all right here by yourself?" "I'll be fine, sweetheart. You just focus on school and being happy." Sam approached carefully, maintaining the polite distance that had characterized all our interactions since the separation. "I'll have him back by 7 on Sunday," he said. "Sam, I started, then stopped. What was there to say? That I was sorry, that I regretted everything, that I finally understood what I'd lost. "What, Vesperine?" "Nothing, just take care of him." "I will." As I watched them drive away, I realized that Sam had gotten everything he'd wanted from our divorce. He had our son, he had the respect of our friends and family, and he had his dignity intact. Meanwhile, I had a house I couldn't afford, a job where I was treated like a pariah, and the knowledge that I'd destroyed my family for a fantasy. But the worst part wasn't the loneliness or the financial stress or even the loss of Elijah's daily presence. The worst part was finally understanding that Sam had been a good husband all along. He'd been faithful, reliable, devoted to our family. He'd worked hard to provide for us, had been a wonderful father, had loved me completely for 10 years. And I'd convinced myself that wasn't enough because it wasn't exciting. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I heard through mutual friends that Sam was dating someone new, a woman from his office who appreciated his quiet strength and dry sense of humor. They were taking things slowly, being careful about introducing her to Elijah, building something real and lasting. Graeme, meanwhile, had been promoted to regional manager and transferred to another city. He'd never contacted me again after that final phone call. I was completely alone, living in a house full of memories, working at a job where everyone knew my story, trying to rebuild a life I'd destroyed through my own selfishness and stupidity. And every night, as I sat in our empty living room, I remembered Sam's smile on the night of our anniversary party. That calm, knowing smile that had said everything. He'd already known what I was going to choose. He'd just been waiting for me to choose it.